Thank you very much for joining us for starting the conversation when a loved one needs a little help. I'm your Master of Ceremonies, Tom Osa. Your speakers today are Doug Feldman and Vivian Green Corner, and each with a wealth of personal and professional experience on the care of people with Alzheimer's or dementia. And they're going to offer comprehensive advice today on how to achieve a successful conversation with a parent when there's a need for adjustments due to a decline in memory and or functioning. So I'll give you a brief biography of each. Doug's been the president of Home Helpers in Bergen County and Manhattan for 13 years. He was inspired to start his senior home care company by caring for his father, who had severe Alzheimer's. He's become a certified Alzheimer's caregiver and a certified senior advisor to ensure that his company can properly care for a large number of dementia clients that Home Helper services. And the emphasis is really on physical and cognitive exercises and programs that would slow the progress of, I think we can all agree, it's a terrible disease. And also I should mention, Home Helpers has been chosen as the provider of choice, best of home care for the last 4 years. So you're in good hands today. Vivian Green Corner, she holds a master's degree and she's certified as a dementia care practitioner. For the past 25 years, she has dedicated her career to enhancing the lives of individuals challenged with Alzheimer's disease and offering much needed support and guidance to their caregivers. She's in private practice. She's recognized as a dementia care expert, and she has an active private practice focusing on family caregiver issues. And in addition, she provides dementia care training seminars to home health professionals throughout New Jersey, as well as caregiver support group facilitation through the Alzheimer's New Jersey, serves as a guest speaker for community groups, and offers presentation on caregiver issues. So momentarily, we'll be asking a few brief polling questions during the course of the next 30 minutes or so. So when you see something come up on your screen, and it's very brief, just yes, no answers to the questions, just for the purpose of gathering an understanding of who we're talking with today, so that Doug and Vivian can provide the best information possible. And without further ado, here are your speakers for starting the conversation. Over to you, Vivian.
Thanks, Tom, for your introduction. And for those who are attending, thank you for your time. Doug and I have been collaborating for years on caring for families with individuals who have a form of dementia. We wanted to discuss with you today our firsthand knowledge of what families are encountering in their struggle to have that conversation about the need for change, the need for support, or the need to have assistance in their home. This is not an easy conversation, and that's why we want to bring up some strategies and tips for you today, so it doesn't have to be a conversation that you put off. And that's what we're going to be talking for the next few minutes. So before we start, here's our first poll question, which we would appreciate you fill out.
Okay, so we have 62% of those of you in attendance have recently noticed some deterioration in your mom and or father, and 30% no at the moment. So we will reshare the screen. And Vivian, shall we turn this over to Doug for a bit?
Yes.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you, Tom and Vivian. Based on the poll results, obviously all of you who are on this meeting today have a need to really find an answer to this. We have some principles that we're going to go into great detail for, and that will allow you to really help to start the conversation. The principles we're going to go in detail are, it's their life and their choice. You must respect their independence. It's a conversation, not a lecture. Listen with your heart and look to the future. These you will learn more about in the future. Okay, next slide, Tom. With a little thought and preparation, any family can start an open and honest dialogue that can lead to a plan for the future that everybody agrees to and understands. We start by asking questions, not yes and no questions, but real questions about what your loved one enjoys doing and how he or she can keep as much of that treasured independence for as long as possible. In so many families, there's only one child, often the daughter, who takes the lead on the responsibility of being the lead person. And unfortunately, the sons often are very happy to let her do all the dirty work. However, she may start noticing, like a lot of you have, that there is some deterioration, such as changes in physical appearance, repeated questions, frequent falls, and depression. However, when important decisions have to be made, it is essential that every family member is in sync as to the next steps in speaking to their parents. I have an example of one situation that doesn't work so well. This was a case of a daughter who was an only child taking care of her mother with severe Alzheimer's. She didn't have time due to her career and the fact that she had children to really care for her mother, particularly during this pandemic when she could hardly see her other than by telephone call and sometimes Zoom. So what did she do? While her mother would frequently throw out caregivers immediately when they arrived at their house, the daughter found that she could deal with people that lived in her mother's building, such as doorman and handyman and maids, who her mother was familiar with, having lived in the building for 30 years. And she used them to take her out, to be with her. And this was not only somewhat unethical, but definitely not beneficial for the mother because she continued to act up. And it wasn't until she finally hired home helpers that we were able to put aides in there that the mother continued to allow to work with her. Vivian?
Doug has mentioned when there is a individual just taking care of a parent. But in my work, I find that it's often that there are families, adult children. So I want to just take a moment to talk about the importance to include the whole family. To have the conversation go well requires that everybody's input is considered. Everybody has to share their concerns and their proposed solutions. It all has to be discussed openly. Now, I have found often that people don't agree. People don't share the same concerns. They don't see it the same way, and they often don't come up with what they think is the right solution. Some might say, bring in an aide, and some might say, let's just place mom in a facility. All this needs to be discussed before you're going to have that conversation with mom or dad or another person that needs to be making changes due to their deterioration. Everybody's input needs to be considered, but mostly you need to have a plan. The plan includes what is going to be discussed, who is going to take the lead in that conversation, when is that conversation going to occur? Is it during the day? Is it at night? Is it on the telephone? Is it in that person's home? Is it in their kitchen? Really, it's the planning that's important and the delivery that's important. When I say delivery, you don't want to have mixed messages. As an example, if you feel that one of the concerns is that there's weight loss, you don't want to have one person in conversation saying, you know, I think that you seem to have lost weight because your clothes look larger on you. And then another sibling chimes in and says, what are you talking about? Mom looks great. That's not how you want the conversation to go. You all want to be on the same page. It's sort of like, I'll use the football analogy. You want to huddle first, come up with the game plan, and then execute it on the playing field. Doug?
Ideally, you're having this conversation well before there's an immediate need, but we really can't know for sure until we have the conversation. For those families who reside far from their parents, it is often difficult to notice changes that may require attention because you're on phone calls or maybe Zoom, and very often one spouse will cover up their other spouse's memory problems during phone calls by answering for them. One time during a conversation, one spouse with memory loss was very agitated during questioning, and he thought this was unwarranted harassment. And it wasn't until one child asked his father if he knew who the President of the United States was, and his annoyed answer was, "Of course I know, it's Eisenhower." Vivian?
So Doug and I have brought up the conversation, the conversation. So I just want to clarify what I mean by it's a conversation. It's a discussion. It's not a inquisition, which is kind of the knee-jerk reaction we have when we're concerned. You know, you can go in, for instance, and mom, who was just a neat and tidy housekeeper, always had plenty of food. You go in and you see things are disarray. Mom's clothes are not clean. They're soiled. Maybe there are pots and pans in the sink, not too much food. You don't want to start off with, what's going on here? I mean, look at you. You've never been like that. It's not an inquisition. It's a conversation in that you want to share what you've noticed, what your concerns are, and you want to also ask that person, did they notice any change? Do they have any concerns? You know, I'm not going to say this isn't an emotional conversation. It's emotional on both ends. It's emotional on your end, but you have to appreciate it's going to be emotional on their end. They might be fearful. They might be fearful that even in having this conversation means that you're going to come in and take over, or they might be ashamed or embarrassed about the changes of how they used to be and how they are now. Or maybe they're depressed or sad about all of this, and they really don't want to expose that. And they don't want to burden you, which is often what I hear from my families. They don't want to burden somebody else. But make sure a way to have that conversation is to include them in what are their concerns. And keep in mind, their list of concerns might not be yours, but their concerns need to be addressed and considered. Always mention, though, in this conversation that the purpose is that you care about them and you will stand by them. You and your family truly care. It's not an attack, it's a conversation. Doug?
The point of saying it's a conversation is that we need to understand what the situation is from the older person's perspective before we can even contribute to a solution or a recommendation. For instance, if you're concerned that your parents shouldn't be driving anymore, you don't start the conversation with, "I noticed all the dents in your car. What's going on?" Instead, start the conversation on a general agreeable subject, such as, "Gee, I really admire your garden, and you must be spending a lot of time working on it to keep it so beautiful. How do you get the supplies for your garden?" Vivian?
So listen with your heart. What does that mean? Another obstacle, and we share this, is our tendency to jump in and solve the problem. We use our kind of what I call problem solving brains rather than just listening with our heart. You might ask in conversation and explore what's going on. You know, you might, again, I'll use the weight loss issue, be concerned about it and talk with mom. And mom says to you, well, I don't have as much of an appetite. That's why I'm not buying as much food. That's why there's not as much food in the refrigerator. When in fact, she might not be eating as well because it has to do with the impairments due to having dementia. By that, I mean, maybe meal preparation has become too difficult for her. Maybe she doesn't remember how to use the microwave or know how to defrost food. I have a situation where a client walked into their mom's place and clearly reeked of a burnt smell, burnt food. And when it was mentioned, the mom said, yeah, that smell's been around for a while now. I think it's somebody in the building that must have burnt something. That's not the answer. In fact, the burnt pot was in mom's cabinet. So it's a matter of listening with your heart, not jumping in to fix things. Have that conversation. Before we go on, here's our next polling question for you.
The results are 50-50. Some of you have had a bit of a conversation and some of you not yet. So thank you for your feedback. And we'll turn this back over to Doug, I believe.
Yes. Thank you. Well, based on those polling results, hopefully you all will get some answers to the questions you have, and you'll be able to use what we're doing. But we're all taught, whether in school or by experience, the best way to start a conversation is to ask questions. But what questions we ask and how we ask them can make a big difference whether the result is a constructive dialogue or a confrontational debate. We'd like to share with you some tips and ideas that our experience shows helps family keep the discussions on the right path. Vivian?
So the kinds of questions, what's that noise? The kinds of questions that we want to ask are what I call open-ended questions. They're not questions that are going to get just a yes or no answer, because that's not going to really give you information. You want to ask a question that you learn as to really what the issues are that are going on. So I'll give you an example of a question that's not open-ended. Mom, all these bills are lying around. Like, do you have a system to pay bills on time? That's a yes or no. They're going to say yes, they do, or no, they don't. You want to approach it in an open-ended way. And I'll give you another example in dealing with that. You might want to start the conversation with, you know, there's so many scams that people are getting lately, either on the phone or they're getting scammed through letters. And people are talking about it. It's on the news. Friends are talking about it, that they don't know the difference when they get a piece of mail, whether it's a real bill that they need to pay or whether it is a scam. I know that I'm trying to sort this out. What are you doing to sort out the bills that you need to pay? What's your system? That's an open-ended question that will give you information then about bill paying. Doug?
Okay, don't ask direct questions to your loved ones just about themselves. Ask about other things, the weather, the supermarket, the house. Subjects that can shed some light on challenges and opportunities, but without putting your loved one on the defensive. Asking if they feel comfortable driving, for example, may make a senior feel like you're angling to take away those car keys. Asking about traffic in the neighborhood or road projects might yield clues about how comfortable and confident they are behind the wheel and how often they get out. Asking about one of your favorite foods that your mother always cooked for you may give you an indication of how much cooking your mom is still doing, and are they eating nutritiously? Vivian?
You also want to ask about other people. One of the greatest challenges now for older adults is being isolated. This is not just about COVID. This is a challenge pre-COVID and after COVID, isolation. And it is something that we need to pay attention to so that our older adults are engaged. So you do want to ask about other people. You don't want to go in, again, with the negative, with, you never talk about your friend Molly, how come? Instead, you want to approach it with, you know, Mom, I haven't heard anything about Molly lately. Have you spoken with her? Has she called you? You want to ask how she's doing. If she says, I haven't heard from Molly, you might say, gee, you might want to give her a call. I mean, everybody loves to get a phone call. You also might, if there's dementia, reach out to Molly, because my understanding is with people with dementia is they don't initiate. And so other people have to do that initiating, whether it's family or friends. You want to get everybody on board to make those calls. But the first step is to ask about other people because you want to know who they care about. Doug?
If you're starting the process early, before there's an immediate need for some accommodation or assistance, then you may find that mom's doing just great. That's really fine. But it doesn't mean that there still isn't planning to do, because we all know that there will be at some point. Now is the time to engage your loved one in a discussion about what happens if, and realistically when, a little more help is needed. What do they want for their golden years? What do they expect from you and other family members? And what can you reasonably do? This conversation will frequently lead immediately to every senior's greatest fear, that you will put them in a nursing home. We all want to make that answer that, of course, we would never do that, but you have to get some sort of response in return, such as they must agree to open up their finances with you and speak to you and or their accountant about how they will live their remaining golden years and have a financially secure golden years. Aging is a part of living, and just as we plan for college and high school and retirement while working, we should also plan for our less capable years before it becomes urgent. Remember, it's a lot easier to build a fire before it gets dark. Vivian?
And in the conversation, it really is critical that this is not a takeover, that you are with them. You're not going to be taking over. Always remember that your role in this conversation is to help them to make good choices, that this is something that you will be doing together. The solution is together to keep them safe and healthy and active. Again, let the person know that your intention is to stand by them and that you and your family members care. Now, I got to give you this reality check. This is not going to happen as a one and done. one conversation, things will be put in place. It's sort of like 2 steps forward and 1 step back. So be prepared that you will need to have the same conversation probably multiple times. Older adults are always weighing and measuring. Change is hard. Change is even harder as you get older because you're concerned about your losses. So make sure that you are giving the message that you are with them. You're not a loss for them. You're an addition for them. And together you're going to resolve this. Doug?
Okay, so let's recap our guiding principles for starting the conversation. Next slide, Tom. Okay, it's their choice and it's their life. We have to get them involved in making this decision. Independence is one of their most important aspects, and we need to respect that and find a way to keep them independent as long as possible. And as we said, we cannot lecture them as to what we know is best for them. We have to let them be involved in the conversation and help make the decisions. We all love our parents, so we must listen with our heart. We cannot just tell them what we know is right. And of course, look to the future. Everything may be great right now, but this may take quite a few conversations to really get on the right track. Vivian? And Tom.
So, again, we want to thank you, Doug, and I thank you for your time and interest. Doug has available, if you see his web email address, he has a booklet called Starting the Conversation, which can be sent to you directly. Reach out to Doug for that. Or I understand it can be obtained as a download. So feel free to do that. On my end, if I can support you, my job is to serve you with dementia advice and guidance on community-based resources. Please don't hesitate to contact me. We have 25 people that are on this Zoom. So the most important part, although we know we have limited time, is for your questions and answers. This is for you. So please ask us questions, and anything that we can't deal with during this Zoom, reach out to Doug or I, and we'll be happy to assist you.
Okay, and we're just going to open that up to questions and answers. For those of you that are attending Zoom webinar for the first time, you should see at the bottom of your Zoom screen a question and answer area where you can ask questions. Looks like we have 3 coming in already. So please feel free to ask a question, and I will provide them to the panelists as they come in. I'm actually going to start with this first question that came in. Quote, my mom recently agreed to have an aide, but now won't let her into her house. What should I do?
Okay, I'll take that question. This is a very frequent situation with anybody with dementia. And what we as an agency do is we know this is common, so that before we even send an aide into a home with anybody with any kind of dementia, we make sure we completely go over the plan of care with the aide, so she is familiar with the individual, and then we personally take her to the house for her first visit. And that will make the introduction easier because in most cases, I already have made the introduction when we first started the case. So every time I've done this so far with the introduction, the person with dementia has calmed down, and it usually goes reasonably well from then on.
Okay, thank you. So we have our next question. I take care of my mom and have told my siblings about my concerns. They think I am overreacting and they do not support me. What can I do?
I'll answer that one. And thank you for that question, because it is very common that there usually is one sibling, and it usually ends up being the adult daughter who takes on responsibility and doesn't get the support that she needs. What I do suggest to my caregivers that are in situations like that is to really reach out to those unsupportive family members and have an open discussion, saying that I really need your support, but I feel that I'm not getting it. And it's hard to deal with mom. I don't mind having these disagreements, but they need to be hashed out. And then what I think is a great strategy is to ask if you could send a report to those family members. Come up with your decision. Should it be a bi-weekly report, a weekly report? And in that report, you specifically say what the challenge is. For example, I've tried to give mom a shower and she refuses. I tried a second time during the day and she still refuses to do that. So that you really are sharing a report on what the challenges are. And that opens discussions. That's been my experience.
Okay, thank you, Vivian. We have another question that came in from one of the attendees. My mother-in-law is paranoid and hides her jewelry, but accuses others of stealing it, specifically the aid. What do we say? How do we handle this?
I can answer that. You want to answer it, Doug? And I'll chime in.
We can both answer that.
Okay.
This is a very, very frequent situation with anyone with dementia, because what they're often doing is, unknowingly, they are hiding certain items. And we make our caregivers well aware of this. And when they're accused, they don't take it personally. And what we have found is we go on a big search of the house. We get our client involved in the search too, which will calm her down. And frequently we've found jewelry stuck in socks in the drawer or the most unusual places. But in the case of our caregivers, we do all background checks, criminal background checks. We have never had a case where anyone has stolen. And as long as we keep the children aware of this situation, usually we get a happy result.
I want to underscore what Doug is saying and just say that what you don't want to do is say, nobody stole anything. You know, you probably misplaced it. Their reality is their reality. If they feel somebody stole something, you need to join with their feelings about this, which is they're probably furious about that and feeling vulnerable. So the first thing you also want to do, along with Doug, what he said, is you want to say something like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. This is pretty scary. This is not like you to have things misplaced, and then proceed with what Doug said. But you need to join emotionally and not criticize or discount how they're feeling.
Okay, thank you both for the answer to that question. We have another from our attendees. Where can we get information explaining dementia in lay terms? My dad has vascular dementia and we need to know the path it takes.
Certainly reach out to me. I'm happy to give it to you in lay terms as to what is going on. In addition, if you want to do a web search, locally, ALZNJ, which stands for Alzheimer's New Jersey, has a great website. Alzheimer's Association also has a great website, which will give you that information. I'm more than happy, though, if it feels too burdensome, just reach out to me and I will break it down for you.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have just one more question at the moment. Um, how do I take away the car keys from my dad?
This is also a very common situation. In New Jersey, particularly, it's very easy to continue driving probably till you're 100 years old because no one's going to take away your license. There's no additional tests. The one thing you don't do is say you're too old to drive, you're not healthy enough to drive. You may say, it may be dangerous if you drive for other people. We would not want you to hurt other people. But what we do as a next step is children really can't say these things because their parents won't listen. But what we do say is try to get your doctor, whether it's your general practitioner or an optician, to give him an eye test to determine whether he is capable or she is capable of driving. Then they might listen to the doctor.
I also want to add that you can't just take away the keys. I mean, the day we got our license was an incredible day of freedom for all of us. That taking away the keys is also restricting their ability to access what they want, whether it's friends or shopping, whatever they need to do. So part of the plan has to be to come up with alternate transportation options, whether it's somebody else driving them, getting an Uber to drive them, in New Jersey, Access Link to drive them. You need to come up with transportation options when you're having that conversation about taking the keys away.
Okay, got another question came in on chat. What if the caregiver can't handle the dementia person's demands and necessities? Does this mean you should talk the person into going into a memory care facility?
Doug, you want to answer that one?
No, I'll let you do the first part of this, then I will, because this is one of my current situations.
What if the caregiver can't, if it's a family caregiver that can't? The person who has dementia, it's a brain disease, and it is the responsibility that they are cared for. If it doesn't happen by family, absolutely, either bring somebody in to provide the care who is trained to do that and experience, give that a shot. Or if that's not an option for you, and everybody has to make their own decisions about whether they're wanting to take the step of bringing a caregiver in, but if it's not for you, then yes, you need to be considering a memory care facility, because ultimately you and family member have to be making that decision for that person who no longer can make it due to their cognitive impairment. So you do have options, but the bottom line is that care needs to be provided for their health, their safety, and their involvement.
If I could just add to that, this was sort of one of the examples I gave in our talk here. And what happens here is the caregiver who can handle this person, is she trained in dementia? Because if she's not, it'll just be a disastrous situation and continue to spiral out of control. If they are dementia trained, they have the techniques to try to calm the people down. However, if you get to the situation where the person is doing dangerous things, either threatening the caregiver or threatening herself and with killing herself, that's the time you have to get some more professional help, whether it's a psychiatrist or, and at that point, it could very well be, if medicines won't work to calm the person down, then a memory care facility might be the right solution.
We have another question that just came in. As the daughter-in-law, how do you convince the only child son's help is needed? He is in denial.
This is, thank you for that question, because it's very common, and some things that Doug and I talk a lot about. We have cases like that together. It has to be addressed in a very concrete way. As I mentioned before, if the son doesn't see it, you need to give him concrete changes that has occurred in his mother, whether it has to do with her safety, her health, or her activity. So that's what you need to do. Bring it down to a very concrete level about, as I mentioned before, maybe there's weight loss, maybe bills are not being paid, maybe she's sleeping too much because she's bored, maybe she can't prepare meals. You really need to do a very thorough checklist about the individual in terms of the changes he or she has made. If there's a change in the environment that's unusual, somebody who is neat and tidy, the house is in disarray, somebody who had been driving, but you look at the car and there are dings and dents, you need to look for the concrete, and that's the first place to start that conversation. Sometimes, though, you need to bring in another person. I'm not promoting myself, but sometimes you need a professional or to be brought into the conversation. It can be somebody like myself. Maybe it's the physician that is treating the mother. Maybe it's a member of the clergy. Maybe it's another friend. Sometimes bringing in another person to join the conversation that's familiar or professional kind of creates an opportunity to create some kind of recognition and then change.
Okay. We have another question that has come in. What is the best approach for dealing with siblings who are not all on the same page with mom and dad's needs? I guess this goes back to prepping in advance the conversation, as you mentioned before. And the part of the question, is it best to let it up to the one with the medical proxy?
No, the medical proxy is one aspect of what's going on, but the day-to-day care might be another person who is involved in mom or dad's care. So everybody does have a role. Who takes the lead might be the medical person, but everybody's input has to be regarded, as I mentioned earlier, both their concerns and the problems. And it's not an easy discussion. Most families do disagree. I'm relieved when I get a family that's all on board, because it is unusual. But again, get back to the concrete as to what is going on, those real changes in mom or dad, and what the solution will be. And sometimes it's a financial one and a medical one as to the decisions that need to be made. It's real for all families.
I mean, I have a little one to add to that, because I have a current situation just like that. And it's a client in Manhattan who has 3 children involved, 2 who live in New York and 1 who lives in Chicago. And they fight all the time as to their mother's care. So finally, the proxy for all decisions was given to the child in Chicago, who happens to be a medical doctor. And even though he hasn't seen his mother in a long, long time, he is making all the correct decisions and working with the agency to make sure that they are being done and that the other children cannot dispute what his decision is. It's nice to have one person in charge.
Okay, I believe that should conclude all of our questions that we have at the moment. So one more time, would like to thank everyone for being here, for starting the conversation when a loved one needs a little help. I know that this is a sensitive topic, but it's one that we all care about. Certainly want to make sure that our loved ones are taken care of. I'm going to leave the contact information on the screen one more time. So you can reach Doug at homehelpershomecare.com. That's the email address. The phone number is 201-655-8688. You could also visit their website on the web at fortlehomecare.com. And finally, I'll mention for more, I think, comprehensive advice on how to take care of your loved one over time, I also should mention Doug's Facebook page at facebook.com, Home Helpers Fort Lee, New Jersey. You could just do a quick search on Facebook and you'll easily be able to find it. And then for Vivian, contact information is on the screen, Vivian Green Corner, MA, CDP. Her email address is vivian.corner@gmail.com. VivianGreenCorner.com is the website address, and you can reach her directly at 201-960-4277. So once again, we thank you very much for being here, for starting the conversation when a loved one needs a little help, and we hope to see you at our next presentation. Thank you, and have a wonderful 2021. May yours and the 2021 of your loved ones be a good one. Take care for now.